South Hills Church, I'm really excited to have Blair with us today. We get to hear how God used the people in his life to transform his heart. When did you guys start going to South Hills?
17 years ago?
Yeah, about 17 years ago.
Wow.
A neighbor across the street just kind of came over and we were talking and mentioned it, so we stopped over here.
What was going on in your life during all that time?
Oh, geez. I went to college, got married, and was married for 15 years. But at the end, we decided to separate. During the separation, it didn't go well. And it put me in a bad state of mind. And I lost friends. I didn't see my family. Honestly, it just broke me down.
When we were dating, I had to establish a Tuesday night only. You're only allowed to talk about it on Tuesday nights because it was every single day.
Did anybody reach out to you during that time?
Only Dave and Lisa. Most of my friends would scatter. They didn't want to hear about the divorce.
Why would you guys continue to reach out to him?
We love him. He's family. It just never occurred to us not to invite him.
Dave and Lisa invited us to South Hills Corona. We were staying at their house.
You know, just the extension of, hey, we're just going to be there if you want to go, but no pressure or anything like that.
And we loved it.
Yeah.
We were very welcomed here, but then we live in Mission Viejo, and we said, there's no way we're driving to Corona
Love you,
every
but-
week. Yeah.
I totally get it. I wouldn't drive there every Sunday either. But you know what? One church, many campuses. We have one down there in Costa Mesa. I know the pastor, it's great. You'll love it. Give it a try.
Once we showed up to the Costa Mesa South Hills, Kathy specifically came and wrapped her
right.
arms around us, and it was amazing.
It was awesome. No, everybody was so friendly. As soon as everybody realized we were new, everybody came and said hello.
It was powerful.
Very powerful.
If you were going to encourage our church and the people sitting and listening to this story today to actually extend an invitation to someone in their life, what would you share with them?
They're your family, they're your friends, so you want to make sure that they get to feel and experience the love of God.
Keep asking, and hopefully eventually.
It's only hard the first couple of times. It comes out in natural conversation a lot, and God is going to provide those opportunities for you. Taking the courage to step out when that opportunity is there is really important, and it's exciting. Some people say yes that you really didn't think they would, and you see lives change, and that's really an honor.
You guys, thank you. I would have never gotten to where I'm at. I would have never made it through what I made it through without everyone supporting me. You never left, which at that time, I'm not sure I would have done as well as you guys. Thank you, because I honestly don't think I would have made it to this bad. And I would hate to think what my life would look like if I didn't have this in my life.
Well, thank you guys for sharing your story. Because you guys took the time to share your story, our church gets to hear the power of God. South Hills, so I hope you feel encouraged by this story. I hope you feel motivated to invest into the people's lives that are in your life, and that you would also extend an invitation to someone that may be going through a tough time so they can also experience the joy that Jesus Christ offers.
All right, so the idea for this series, by the way, isn't it cool that we are the perfect place for imperfect people, that we prove the point that we don't have to be the same? I mean, look around at the different jerseys that are represented in this room. I mean, you can't all be Cowboys fans, and we still love you and accept you just the way you are, no matter who you root for. But anyway, the idea for this series is really built around that old sort of kids, like nursery rhyme that we all learned as kids, Randy and Hansi sitting in a tree. We don't know why you're sitting in a tree. That's a weird place to decide to make out. Like for a makeout session, that you don't want to climb a tree. You might fall out, but you're sitting in a tree, Kissing. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in the baby carriage. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we're all obviously different and we're not the same. Our stories are not the same. But as silly as that little rhyme is, in general, I think we'd all agree that that is a pretty good order of events, where you go from dating to love and marriage and then family, that progression probably works best. Now, maybe you got that progression out of order. A lot of us do. And if that is you, I do want to say, contrary to what you may have been told or what you may have experienced in a church or somebody who spoke for God or claimed to be speaking for God, it doesn't mean that you're a horrible person or that God's mad at you or he wants to punish you. But chances are, if you did get those things out of order, you probably got burned by some of those decisions. So maybe for you, your story looked more like first comes sex, then comes more sex, then comes a baby, then comes a shotgun wedding and a loveless marriage and then a whole bunch of other drama, right? Or maybe it was first comes confusing romance for love and jumping straight to marriage, and then comes divorce and a broken heart and years of recovery, and finally somewhere way down the road you meet somebody new, and then first comes love. Or first comes finding out that you have no connection between you, and then comes realizing that she's not really into you at all, and you jump out of that tree with that person and back onto your dating app, and then comes finding another tree with somebody else who's really, really far away from that first tree that you were in, right? But none of those scenarios are really what any of us want, right? Most of us go into relationships to find somebody to settle down with for the long haul. But historically speaking, the concept of dating is actually still pretty new. I mean, when you think about the whole sort of span of history, for most of history, marriages were arranged far more than they weren't. And so from a historical perspective, dating is almost like we're all playing a game while we're also trying to create the rules for that game at the same time, which explains why it can feel so complicated and confusing sometimes, I think. And also it explains why when we hear stories of people who are married and who do love each other for a lifetime, we usually describe them as being lucky. Oh, they're so lucky. But is that what it is, right? Is it just dumb luck that you found somebody worth being married to for the rest of your life and you loved each other for your life? Is it just dumb luck? So we love Disneyland. We actually had a chance to go this last week. It was the first time we had been in a while. We used to be annual pass holders for like 22 years, and then COVID hit, and Disneyland changed all this stuff around and all this stuff. But we took our two youngest kids this last week, and we had a blast. But have you ever been waiting in line in a super long line at a theme park somewhere, and while you're waiting in line, you wait all this time, and you get almost to the front, and then the ride breaks down? And you know what I'm talking about? For a few years ago, we were at Disneyland and we got in early, and so we went over and rode some rides, but Space Mountain was broken. It started not a great day to start the day. Space Mountain's down, but we happened to be sitting over near Space Mountain when it was 8 o'clock, and they were letting all the peasants come in. The regular doors open, all the regular people can come in, and all these people come running over. I was standing by Space Mountain, and I'm telling you, I know this makes me a horrible person, but watching the masses amount of people who were just thrilled to go there, just run, don't run, and they're just trying not to run. They're trying to get to Space Mountain, and they're just excited, and they come over there, and then they come around the corner, and it's broken, just like their face, just like, oh, and it was just so heartwarming to watch the heartbreak on all those people's faces. No, but I have been in that spot, right? I've been in a long line waiting for a ride, and then they come out, and sometimes at Disneyland they'll just tell you it's not going to be up for a while, go do something else. But sometimes they're like, well, I'll just kind of hang out and see how it goes. And so you don't know what to do, so you stay in the line, right? You just kind of stand there and wait. But then a big, huge chunk of time goes by, so you finally decide to give up and to go do something else, to go get in a different line. But as soon as you get out of line, the ride opens up again, and now your place in line is gone. And you're angry and frustrated, and you kind of feel cheated because it costs you an ungodly amount of money to go to Disneyland, and you only had one day to spend at the park, and now half of it's gone, or it feels like half of it's gone because you waited for this one ride that's broken. And you could have been riding other stuff. You could have been doing other stuff with your time, but you wasted all your time waiting for this thing. Now, I think when you're single, that can sort of feel like the picture of your life and your relationship, especially when you're a young adult, right? Everybody else seems to have somebody. You'd kind of like to find someone, and no one says it out loud, but it feels like the message is that your life doesn't really start or truly count until you find your person and settle down. And There's something sort of in us that resents or hates that, but also kind of feels like it's sort of true. You cannot help but feel like you're just in this holding pattern, like you're waiting in line for a broken ride that may or may not ever let you get on. You don't want to abandon the possibility, but you can also feel like you're just kind of sort of wasting your time waiting around for this thing. Or maybe for you, you were married. You've ridden that ride, and it was great until it broke while you were on it, right? And there are other times where it was fantastic or it was terrifying because you have the scars to prove it. It wasn't a super fun ride. There are people in your life, right? If you're in that situation, who are like, oh man, get back in line, give it another shot. And you kind of want to, but you're also not sure it's worth going down that road again. Yeah, good, rode that ride. So I wanted to spend some time this morning talking about all the attraction and romance and dating stuff, all the before marriage stuff. So if you are married, come back next week because that's all the married stuff. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But also if you're married, don't check out because you may have to work at it a little bit more than usual. But I promise there's some really good stuff in here for you too. Because none of us have arrived, right? So lean in, not out. And if you're a young adult, I'm going to actually kind of put on my dad hat for a little bit of this message because I have adult children who are single. And so this is like some of the stuff, some of the conversations that I've had, my wife and I have had ongoing with our kids, and just a chance to kind of reiterate some of these things. One of the biggest bummers I think about church is that single people often feel awkward and uncomfortable in church. Which is strange because the two most significant figures in Christianity in the New Testament, Jesus and the Apostle Paul, were both single. In fact, check out what the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 38. He wrote these words. He says, so the person who marries his fiancée does well, but the person who doesn't marry does even better. So in other words, he's going, singleness is not a disease or a condition to be cured. You're not broken or less than, you're not incomplete. He actually says that it's better. And what does that mean? Well, obviously, like relationships, and especially when you're married and you have a family, they take up most of your time and energy and focus and money, and they should. And he's going, when you're single, you have the opportunity that married people really don't have. You're free to build your life and build yourself and invest in the world in ways that married people can't. But he says that being single is only better if you actually leverage your singleness to do that stuff. So he's going, don't wait around. You're not defective. Don't wait for this line. Like, don't just stand in this line waiting for this broken ride. You don't need somebody else to complete you. Go make the most of who you are and where you are right now. Now, most of the time when we talk about relationships, we focus on what happens between us once we're in a relationship, right? We focus on the dynamics and the interactions we have once we're in, or at least on our way to being in a relationship. But I actually want to back up this morning, go a little bit upstream, and this is why what we're going to talk about applies to all of us, really, whether you're single or married. Because I want to talk about the stuff that happens before any of that even comes up. Because we all want relationships that work and are healthy and are life-giving and last a lifetime. But where do we actually begin? Well, there's a piece of scripture that I want to take you to that I think is incredibly instructive and helpful because it talks about who we are as people. And it's actually written in the Old Testament in the book called Proverbs, and it's written by a queen, and she was writing to her son about the qualities to look for in a future wife, to help him kind of focus on what really matters and not get hung up on superficial things that are fleeting. Now, you may have read it before, or you may have heard it before, or you may have experienced it if you've been in church. It's a favorite on Mother's Day kind of passage, but it's often talked about as a standard to sort of measure ourselves against, but that was really never the intent. The mom who wrote this wasn't prescribing a list of personal qualities for her son. She was actually describing a picture of a beautiful life. She was describing a picture of a beautiful relationship and a life of character and meaning. And so with that as the backdrop, I want to read to you what she wrote, and then we're going to kind of pick apart a few pieces of it and draw out some I think, really helpful truths. So it's Proverbs chapter 31, beginning with verse 10. It says, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. Her husband can trust her, and she will greatly enrich his life. She brings him good and not harm all the days of her life. She finds wool and flax and busily spins it. She is like a merchant ship bringing her food from afar. She gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her husband and plan the day's work for her servant girls. She goes to inspect a field and buys it. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She's energetic and strong and a hard worker. She makes sure her dealings are profitable. Her lamp burns late into the night. Her hands are busy spinning thread, her fingers twisting fiber. She extends a helping hand to the poor and open arms to the needy. She has no fear of winter or her household, for everyone has warm clothes. She makes her own bedspreads. She dresses in fine linen and purple gowns. Her husband is well known at the city gates where he sits with other civic leaders. She makes belted linen garments and sashes to sell to the other merchants. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. When she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instructions with kindness. She carefully watches everything in her household and suffers nothing from laziness. I just love sometimes the turn of phrase in the Bible, because can I tell you, I've suffered lots of things from laziness. Anybody with me? Like, you've suffered from laziness. Okay, but this lady, she suffers nothing from laziness. Verse 28, her children stand and bless her. Her husband praises her. He says, there are many virtuous and capable women in the world, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. Reward her for all she has done. Let her deeds publicly praise her, or in other words, her life, who she is and what she's about, speaks for itself. Now, this passage isn't just about what a good wife looks like. And I want to spend the rest of my time kind of talking a little bit about how this applies to all of us. But it's not just about what a good wife looks like. In fact, notice how it describes the husband and how he treats and interacts with his wife. If you went back and reread it, you would see this, that he understands her, he values her, he needs her, he listens to her, he trusts her, he respects her, he celebrates her, he releases her, he validates her, he encourages her to dream, to lead, and to work. He encourages her to grow, he trusts her judgment. He wants her to succeed in the things that she cares about. He applauds her contribution, he models respect for his children, and he gives her the spotlight. Any ladies want to be married to a guy like that? That's a pretty good deal, right? I love that it portrays the wife, that she's not just somebody that's stuck at home in some mold that we think, but she's an entrepreneur, she's a businessman, she's a businesswoman, she's a force for good in the community. Yes, she's a wife and mom, but she's wheeling and dealing, she's buying and selling land and planting vineyards and doing all this stuff. Now here's the deal, we're all off the hook. Because this person is theoretical, okay? Nobody can live up to Wonder Woman over here. That's not the point of why this was written. The intention of why this was written wasn't to crush us under the weight of some hypothetical standard. It was to free us to become the very best version of ourselves that God created us to be. See, I also love the way in which, when you're reading it, the way that the husband and wife play off of each other. As you read it, it becomes apparent that one of the really big reasons that each of them are so successful is that they're partnered with someone who's confident in themselves, but who also understands that they're stronger and better together. This is absolutely huge, because whether you're single or married, right, our default starting point is almost always with the other person. Right? If you're single, your default starting point is like, I'm looking for a man who's like this, or I'm looking for a woman who's like this. Right? If you're married, you're like, I want my husband to be more like this. I want my wife to be more like this. But the person that we should start with isn't them, right? The person we should start with is the person that's in the mirror. So if you're single, can I just tell you, like, if you were to meet the right person before you become the right person, that will be a recipe for heartache and unhappiness. And the truth is you could actually start asking around some of the married people in your life, and if they had, a moment of truth serum, they might tell you that some of the struggle in their relationship, some of the struggle that they've experienced in their marriage has been this dynamic having to work itself out as they sort of grow up and learn to process how to be better themselves, right? They've had to work through it in their own relationship. The problem is when we get married, we don't stop focusing on the other person, right? We just want to fix them even more, right? We focus, you got to get better. We want them to change. But what we never think about is this, right? Like, if you're single, Here's a question maybe to wrestle with. Are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? Like if you found the one that you really wanted, would they even want you? Right? Because have you invested enough in your own character to become the kind of person that they would love? If you are married, if your husband or your wife became the person that you want them to become, would you be the person that that person would still want to be married to? See, the essence of this passage in Proverbs is this. It's like, look for these things, and while you're looking for them, work at becoming the kind of person that you hope to find in somebody else. Now, as I said a second ago, there's a lot in these verses, and we can't possibly go through it all, but there are several different things that I want to draw your attention to. The first one is found in the very first verse of this passage, in verse 10. It says, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. And remember, we're not just talking about wives. Who can find a virtuous and capable person? They are more precious than rubies. And I love that this is how he begins. Who can find? Because you know what that means? It means there's going to be a search involved. It might actually take a while to find somebody of character to join your life with. It also means it's going to take some time and some energy for you to become someone worth finding. So who or what should we be searching for or striving to become? Well, he says, someone who is virtuous and capable. In other words, you need to work to be and find someone who lives with integrity and demonstrates responsibility. He uses that word virtuous. Can I just tell you, there's no substitute for marrying well. There just isn't. I remember a bunch of years ago, when I first realized I had crossed over, and because I'd stopped listening to music on the radio, but then was listening to talk radio, because it just happened somewhere along the way. And so I was listening to talk radio, and I turned it on, and there was this counselor, and people were calling in and getting advice. And this lady called in to get some advice with her husband, about her relationship with her husband. And when she finished, the counselor or the therapist was just like, I hate to break it to you, I don't know that you can fix that. It sounds like you didn't marry well. You married poorly. And there's no substitute for marrying well. And I was just like, man, that sounds harsh. And then as I've been a pastor and I've had just countless numbers of people that come to me, I'm just like, there's no substitute for it. Character matters most when you're going to join your life to somebody. And that's actually really, really good news, because it's one of the only things that's within your control. Right? There's a lot that's out of your control. I wish I was 6'1" and looked like Matthew McConaughey and had his bank account. But you just work with what you got. But you can always grow and improve your character. So he talks about being virtuous, but then he uses this word capable, right? You know who wants to be with someone who can handle their life and take care of themselves and is committed to their own growth? Everybody, that's who. Marry a partner, not a project. There's no shortcut in life. There's no life hack to knowing if you found somebody like this. It just takes time. Who can find? It means there's going to be a search. And that's really, really annoying, but it's worth it, because it describes them how? As being more precious than rubies. See, because rubies are rare and valuable, and those things go together. When something's valuable and it's in low supply, it only increases the value of that thing. And not only is it true of these hypothetical people that are being described here, it's also true of you. If you're a young person, don't try to be somebody else. Be who God created you to be. Don't try to be somebody that person wants you to be. Don't sell yourself short. Don't settle for somebody who doesn't love and appreciate and celebrate who you are. Of course, keep working at becoming the best version of you. Keep working at living with integrity and responsibility. But just because somebody wants you, just because somebody wants to be with you, doesn't mean they actually value you for who you are. There is a difference. So he says, who can find? He goes on in the next few verses, says this. Says her husband can trust her, and she will greatly enrich his life. She brings him good and not harm, all the days of her life. So she's describing somebody who's trustworthy and who's a blessing to the people that they're close to. In other words, she's this mom that's writing to her son. She's going, work to be and find somebody who makes everything that they get involved with better. Have you ever known somebody that when they show up, everybody's excited and kind of relieved because there's something about them that doesn't just light up the room, they also lighten the load, right? Or they don't just show up and lighten the load, they also lighten the room. They're not just that person that comes in and works hard but is kind of grumpy and everybody sort of avoids them. They're somebody that lifts everybody's spirits. And they're not just somebody who walks through the door and makes everybody feel better but don't do anything to help. They do both. I wonder, is that who you're working to be? Do you show up for the people in your life looking for ways to help, asking yourself, how do I get involved? How do I make this better? How do I help them? Do you leave situations and circumstances better than you found them? Are people encouraged or discouraged when they walk away from conversations with you? In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul wrote these words in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. He says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If you've been in church for a long time, you probably know this verse. For a long time, it didn't occur to me like, wait, what is the law of Christ? Because a lot of what we celebrate in Christianity is that Jesus came to set us free from the law and the rules. So what was his law? Well, his law was this new commandment I give you, love like I've loved you. So he's going, you want to know what that looks like? You want to know what it looks like to love someone else like Jesus has loved you? Carry each other's burdens. See, life is heavy. And the older you get, the more you realize and know that, like deep in your bones. I've been a pastor for 27 years. A lot of people have come and sat with my wife and I to get some help in their family. And the details change, but a lot of the relationships struggle. It is usually somewhere because along the way, one of the people decided that they're just sort of done doing their part. They're done carrying the weight anymore. They're done shouldering the burden. See, if you are young and single, you shouldn't even think about dating or getting serious with anyone if you don't want to be someone who carries the burdens of somebody else with them. You don't rescue them. Again, don't marry a project. Don't take on all their burdens. But if you're unwilling to get up under their load and shoulder some of it, and they're not willing to get up under your load and shoulder some of it with you. If you want to find and sustain love, become a burden carrier and then go find another burden carrier. And the chances are you'll be married for a long, long time. Are you somebody that shows up for other people? Thirdly, in verse 25 of Proverbs 31, there's this description. She's clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. In other words, she's talking about somebody who's resilient, somebody who knows who they are, and somebody who's lighthearted. And that might sound like it doesn't matter until you're married to somebody who's not. It says that she's clothed in it. It means it's part of who they are. It's obvious to everybody that there's a depth and a substance to them, that they've been through some stuff and come out the other side. The future doesn't make them nervous, just the opposite. They're optimistic because they're prepared and they work hard. They pray and trust like it depends on God because it does, but they also work like it depends on them because it does. I love that this description couples two of these ideas together, the idea of being dignified and also is coupled with the ability to laugh, because those things are not mutually exclusive. Marry somebody who hasn't just been through some stuff, but has the wisdom that only comes from processing through and healing from the stuff that they've been through. Marry somebody who enjoys their life, because if they don't enjoy it without you, they're not going to enjoy it with you. Marry somebody who gets up when they've been knocked down, who doesn't pack it in when things get hard, who learns from their mistakes, who gets up and tries again and again and again and again. Show me a scripture. Okay, well, there's a proverb that says, though a righteous man fall 7 times, he gets up again. He's not giving us a spiritual principle as much as he's saying, you have a reason when you're in relationship with God to keep picking yourself up and moving forward because God is on your side. There's so much in these descriptions that remind me of my wife. But this one, I was telling her last night, I'm like, one of my favorite things about you is life has been brutal to us in the last 15 years. And we've taken blow after blow after blow, and it has beat us down, and we've been bloody, and we've been a mess. But you just keep getting up and fighting. Finally, there's the verse 30, Proverbs 31. She says, charm is deceptive and beauty does not last, or it's fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. Find and be someone who doesn't just care about their body, but cultivates their soul. There's just no way around this one. It says beauty is fleeting. It doesn't last. We're obviously obsessed with beauty, appearance, and image in our culture, but time is undefeated, right? Everybody going to end up old and saggy and wrinkly. We just are. Besides, appearances can be deceiving. People can look great on the outside and just be rotten at their core. And so part of this is going, if you want to find someone who's better on the inside than they are on the outside, then become someone who's better on the inside than you are on the outside. Because all this is fleeting. It's going to go away. And she says charm is deceptive. I think part of what we ultimately end up learning is that, right, we fall in love with people's personalities, but you got to live with their character. Right? You date their persona, but you marry the person. Make sure you know the difference. Make sure you know their character. Make sure you know who they are. And then she has that last little bit of fears the Lord. And here's the truth. Every single person, every one of us submits to something. Because we all have to answer the question, how am I going to run my life? And so the way whoever or whatever is the highest authority in your life is what will answer that question. How am I going to run my life? Well, I'm going to decide. I'm the authority. I'm the one. But we all submit to something. Here's a pro tip. The job of running your life is way too big for you. God's the only one worthy of that spot. Jesus said it this way in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. And he was in the middle of talking about all this stuff about life, but he lays out this principle. He says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things are going to be given to you and added to you as well. Not only should you seek God first, but you should seek someone who's seeking God first. Somebody who has more love and respect for God than they do for you. Because if they do, they will love you like you should be loved. If you are here and you're single, finding the right kind of person is important, but becoming the right kind of person is even more important. Because we attract what we are, not what we want. If you're married, focus on who you're becoming instead of fixating on who they're not. What they don't do, what they don't bring to the table, what they didn't do the dishes the right way again. Anybody else argue over how the dishwasher should be loaded? There's a right way and a wrong way. See, we all want healthy relationships and lasting romance, but a partnership is only as healthy as the people in it, and your relationship will only be as healthy as the least healthy person in that relationship. So don't just look for health in someone else, but begin building it in yourself. And so that's kind of the question that I want to leave you with this morning and have you wrestle with when it comes to your relationships. Are you more focused on finding, if you're single, or on fixing someone else than you are on actually working on yourself. If so, it's time to step back. It's time to shift your focus. Is whether you're single or married or divorced or whatever, you're confused, not sure what your relationship status is, becoming the right person actually takes practice. And the good news is that it's never too late to start. So there's kind of three practical buckets that I want to maybe end with in terms of where do you start in terms of practicing being the right person, developing the character in your life. Number one, just heal from your past. Heal from your past, prepare for the future, be wise in the present. And no matter where you are, this is true for all of us. If you're going to heal from your past, you got some baggage that's affecting you. I promise you, we all do. Whether it's from your family of origin, or maybe they were just amazing, or you went through some bad relationships, whether it's your parents' divorce, whether it was some abuse, whether it's something, like, I promise you, there's something that's affecting your life and your relationships that you need to work through. Stop pretending it's not there and just begin to process through it. Why? Because relationships are only as healthy as the people in them. Then prepare for the future. Get out of debt. Put effort into building something. And this is not just if you're young. I think one of the reasons why as we get older, we start to wonder what life is actually about, because we step into this cultural narrative that moves us, that the goal of life is for us to get enough money where we don't have to do anything, right? But then we get there and we start going, well, what? There's got to be more to just like leisure and pleasure. Build something with your life. On a practical level, one of the greatest gifts that God has ever given me and our family is the opportunity to start 3 churches, because it like accidentally or necessarily focused our family, our entire family, the last 15, 16 years on building something together. It was something that we've done every week together as a family. It focused all of our energy, and we're all better for it. We're all closer for it. Don't wait for some point down the road to build out some healthy habits, to actually start to spend time in the scriptures, to read, to begin giving, to go to church, to get connected and serving, to be in a small group. You're busy. Of course you are. We're all busy. But building the kind of life that you want only gets harder as you get older, unless you reach a certain age, and then it gets easier again. Finally, be wise in the present. If you're dating, decide now to kind of postpone the physical part of your relationships. If you weren't here last week, go listen to that. We did that whole conversation last week. If you're not married and you're dating somebody, don't live together. Even if you reject God and the Bible and all this stuff, you don't have to believe me, but you can go search it out for yourself. All of the data, university, governments, they've all studied all this stuff. All of the data and research says it's a bad idea for you to cohabitate, that you are much more likely to end your relationship. It's a bad idea. By the way, if you are married, I suggest that you do live together. It's a lot better and a lot funner that way, when you don't have to like kiss them goodnight and go home to a different house. Don't join yourself with someone whose values and faith aren't pointed in the same direction as yours, because one of you will change directions. If you are not a person of faith and you're dating somebody who is, you should run away, because they're not being honest, because they want this to be part of your life. They want to raise kids and be married to somebody whose faith is important to them. They just don't have the courage to say that out loud. And so it's going to be a constant tension. They want to give money to the church. They want to be involved at church. And you don't care anything about that. And so if you don't want to have that tension in your relationship, run away. Be honest about what you want. Don't look for perfection, but definitely look at the path people are on. Surround yourself with people who call you to your best self, who invest in your best self, and who encourage you to be your best self. I think that is one of, if you just remove the spiritual part for a second, which is obviously the main thing, but if you just remove that for a second, that's one of the biggest values about being connected at a church, is that you're surrounded by people who are pulling for you to be your best self, who are going, man, there's more in you. There's more in us. We can be better. We can grow. We can be better husbands and wives. We can be better fathers and mothers. We can be better friends. Finally, a few minutes ago, we talked about how we all submit to something or someone's going to be the highest authority in your life and will determine how you run your life. And let me pull the spiritual part back over for a second. You'll never become who you were meant to be outside of a relationship with Jesus, outside of a relationship with your Creator, with your Heavenly Father. No matter who you are, no matter what your relationship status or where you're at in your life, the most critical piece to this whole puzzle of this first comes love and how we date and how we couple up and how we parent and a marriage and all that stuff, the most critical piece to the whole puzzle is, who is it that's writing your story? But I have to tell you, God will only be as involved in writing or shaping your love life and your love story as you allow him to be. There's a lot of people that we talk a good game, but we put God over on the side. The question is, are you going to hand the pen over and allow him to begin to write the story? Allow him to be the author of your story, of your life. Are you going to let him write your love story? Nobody who's ever handed that pen over has ever regretted it. Let's pray together. God, you came for us. You came so that we could know life. You came so that we could experience life. You came so that we could become all that you dreamed of when you created us. That we wouldn't be held back by our own brokenness and baggage. We wouldn't be held back by sin and shame and by the choices of our past. Lord, that we could be set free. You didn't come to give us a list of rules to follow or a punch list of things to try to attain to that just is unreasonable, that crushes us under the weight of it all. You came to set us free. And yet you do not demand, even in setting us free, even in forgiving us, even in giving us your love and your salvation, you don't demand that we surrender our life to you and give the pen of the story over to you and let you be the author. You ask, you invite, you offer, but you give us your love regardless. And so there's a lot of us, Lord, who've experienced what it feels like to be forgiven. God, we've experienced what it feels like to be loved, to step into the love of our Heavenly Father. We've experienced what it feels like to know salvation in our souls. But we're still the one writing the story, and so we're constantly dealing with the fallout. Lord, we all want to be in relationships that are healthy and work for the long haul. Lord, would you help us? Lord, those that have experienced the challenges and the pain and the heartache of things falling apart, of someone betraying them. Those of us that are maybe in the middle of that, or we're just struggling through how to fight through all the noise and reconnect with one another. But those of us that are here in single and worried and just thinking about the future and wondering if we'll ever experience being known and sharing our life with somebody. Lord, would you meet us all in those places? Lord, may we step into the waiting and continue to allow you to work in our hearts, that we would become all that we could become. We would not sacrifice our character, but allow you to make who you want in us. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for the wisdom of the scriptures. God, thank you for the truth. Lord, help us be burden carriers for the people in our lives. We love you. Amen. Amen.